Philip also. A regular discussion with people in the north of England who lead businesses, employ people and have new ideas to help grow our economy. The Northern Business Podcast is produced by Recognition PR, which serves scores of companies in different sectors across the country, some of which occasionally contribute to this programme. We're kindly sponsored by Virtu Motors plc, one of the top automotive retailers in the UK, with a network of dealerships representing some of the world's most popular automotive brands. I'm Graham Robb. Now, joining in the studio today, I've got Philip Scott from Zest Investment Group. Philip's also a trustee of the charity ReusingIT, and we're going to hear all about that charity. And if you're in business and you have surplus computers or you're changing computers, it's something to listen up to. We also have an unusual element to the programme today because we're going to go back in time in business. We've got Chris Lloyd, who's the chief features writer at the Northern Echo in Darlington, which is at the centre of the universe as far as train enthusiasts are concerned. We're going to start with you, Chris.
Yeah.
This week, and we're in late September 2025, is a really important week in the history of industrialisation of the world. Why?
Well, September the 27th, 1825, so 200 years ago this coming Saturday, locomotion number one opened the Stockton and Darlington Railway with this newfangled steam technology leading the way. And the Stockton-Darlington Railway, its place in history is that it takes all the latest technology of the 1820s and then applies it over an industrial length, 26 miles, and it has the money behind it to really invest in that latest technology, and then it proves that this technology works. It addresses problems that no one had foreseen. For example, opening day of the Stockton-Darlington Railway, we have the world's first passenger carriage. And that's because no one had thought, how do you move humans on a railway before? Because it had all been coal and minerals going along in wagon type things. Now someone thinks, well, how are we going to put people on a railway? So they get basically a shed with some pram wheels, attach them together, put them on the line. And they have 18 people sitting along benches looking at one another. But I find that absolutely fascinating. And so as we go a little bit further down the line, we come to Hyington Station, which Historic England accepts is the world's first railway station. And again, no one had thought about what do passengers need if they're going to wait for a train? Well, they need somewhere dry. They might like to buy a sandwich. They might buy a ticket. So we have waiting rooms. We can't have men and women in the same waiting room, so we have to have the world's first 2 waiting rooms. And then we devise a platform type thing outside so they can seamlessly move from the station and get onto the train. So all of those wonderful things, like the world's first signalling system, and all this sort of stuff, is the problems that the entrepreneurs kind of come across. They never thought they would have to address, but they have to address them.
And it is a merging of technologies, isn't it? Because the steam engine had already been made. Actually, wagons had been transported on rails for the mines, but by ponies pulling them. So those technologies merge. And then, as you say, the passenger technologies. And I suppose if you were to look at today's modern world, it would be like AI, which merges search technology with writing, with clever. And it was at that level of revolution 200 years ago.
It really shrinks everything down. We have the world's first commuters at Hyington Station, 1827. There is reports in the newspapers of people who can go from this village in County Durham and go 5, even 10 miles down the track to go to work. It seems so obvious now, but then where you lived is where you worked. But now you could travel to work, and it really opens things up, and it opens up things in ways no one had foreseen. Like, I think in 1826, a publican in Shildon sells a ticket to go on the train to Stockton and back, And in that ticket that he sells to his punters, there is admission to Stockton Racecourse. So that's the world's first package holiday, effectively.
Yeah.
And why no one had thought that ordinary people would want to travel for leisure purposes, and yet they did in their thousands. And so we have the whole kind of leisure industry really taking off because of railways.
Now, if we're going to talk about some very specific business things in a minute, because there's a couple of really interesting business stories from 200 years ago, but I just want to plug this book, and this is a brilliant book. You can get it. There is if there's viewers of this podcast all over the country, and if you are thinking about learning more about this fantastic issue, there's a new facility in Darlington called Hope Town. I took my grandchildren to it this weekend.
Good, yeah.
It's extremely interesting. It's got lots of activities there. It's not just boring museum, but there are real trains of the era there. And it's a very, very good facility. So you can see it there. There was a television show on BBC One, BBC Two, that Michael Portillo did, which is a two-parter, and the second part tonight, I think. But there's a lot about it. But let's dive into the business thing rather than the fun exhibits for the general public, because there are two business stories that I think come out of this. One is the raising money business story, and one is the competition and dirty tricks. Let's talk about the raising money first. There was a meeting in the town of Yarm at the George and Dragon Inn. It's all detailed here in this whole chapter with a reconstructed photograph of the entrepreneurs that met. Because it was very difficult to raise money, just as it might be difficult to raise money for a SaaS business today, a software as a service business. This was new. Tell me about that meeting. What do we know about it?
Well, the real difficulty was the raising of the money. So Stockton has a rival plan in 1818 to build its own railway, but it doesn't have any financial backing, and so it cannot get off the ground. As many putative railway schemes in the country at that time, they just struggled for money. And yet the Quakers in Darlington have this fascinating national network which they are able to tap into. And I tell the story of the rush of gold bullion, which is just a fantastic story. So in those days, you used to be able to exchange your pound note into a pound of gold bullion on demand. It says on the back still of a fiver, I think, I promise to pay the bearer on demand. And the Duke of Cleveland, who lived in Raby Castle, had taken against this railway. It was going to go across his land because he was mad keen on fox hunting, and he feared that it would kind of clatter about and scare his foxes from the artificial earth. So he decided to stop the railway from happening. So first of all, he tried parliamentary means. He stuffed the committees giving it planning permission with his landowning chums, and when that failed, he devises this wonderful dastardly scheme locally of ordering all of his tenants in Teesdale to collect up the banknotes of the Quaker Bank that was bankrolling the railway. And then he was planning to go down to the bank, little provincial bank in little old Darlow, and demand that all of these banknotes are changed into gold bullion straight away.
Which was his right to do.
Which was his right to do, but he also knew that this little provincial Quaker bank would not have enough gold in the vaults, so the bank would crash, the railway would collapse, and the foxes would not be scared until he went out and chased them. But the head banker got wind of this scheme, and he dashes down the Great North Road. His name's Jonathan Backhouse, in his horse and cart. He goes round the Quaker banks in London, collecting £30,000 worth of gold, 2.5 million in today's money. Then he dashes back up the Great North Road until he comes to a bridge 3 miles south of Darlington, where one of the wheels comes off his wagons and he grinds to a halt. And this is really dramatic because the Duke of Cleveland's agent is kind of in town and is about to bankrupt the bank and crash the railway and everything. But Jonathan's a very resourceful fellow. He gets out and realises that if he takes the gold bullion off the broken front axle, piles it up onto the good rear axle, the front axle will rise up off the ground and not be necessary. So kind of doing a wheelie, clinging on to the two wheels on his wagon, he dashes into Darlow and he's there when the agent arrives, and he's able to exchange all of the gold bullion into all of the banknotes into gold bullion. He even has a little pile of gold left over. And as the Duke of Cleveland's agent is walking out the door, he shouts after him, "If thy master will sell me your castle, I can pay for it with the same metal," which is a wonderful way of...
Two fingers to
yeah.
It's rather like the Italian job, balancing at the end of the television, balancing the bus with the gold.
That's right. He gives rise to the worst pun in local history, because this action of moving it off the broken front axle onto the good rear axle is known as how Jonathan Backhouse, the head banker, balanced the cash, which is hysterically funny. But in Barclays archives, they have the Backhouse bank ledgers, and we learn that in 1819, in August, he goes to London to collect £32,000, and then the next entry is wheel demolished, £2 and 3 shillings. So that saves the railway.
By the way, the point you mentioned about Barclays, it is worth pointing out that the railways, which started 200 years ago, didn't just give birth to innovation. They gave birth to a whole spin-off of suppliers in the professional services. The bank you discussed became eventually part of Barclays Bank. It was one of the original partners that created Barclays Bank. And if I'm right, correct my history, because it's not as good as yours, Pete Clintock and KPMG also came out of the railways, being auditors of the
auditors over in Middlesbrough. That's where the Pete name comes from. Yes, that's right.
And William Pete owned a stately home almost just outside of Darlington as a result. So there is a lot of business background, but it came about because of entrepreneurs coming together and pooling resources, something that happens a lot in Teesside, in the north of England generally, a slightly different attitude to business. Tell us about the meeting in Yarm.
The meeting in Yarm is really about what they're going to do when the king has died, and so their bill has collapsed, and that's when the shareholders all gather. And it's about that time that they adopt the company's motto, which is a wonderful Latin phrase, periculum privatum utilitas publica, which means at private risk for public service. So there's in this country today, we have grand schemes like HS2, which are going to cost vast amounts of money, and which we just don't manage to raise, and they drag on and on.
And that's very interesting. The motto that doesn't have much private risk. That's the whole point of it. It was all funded by the public sector. So where's the private risk?
Yes. And so it's all down to it's down to these entrepreneurs who have entrepreneurial networks. That's the Quakers who kind of kept all their business deals amongst themselves, really, and are very trustworthy. So other people are keen to be involved with them, which is how come they are such big bankers across the country. And although it is the Stockton and Darlington Railway, the actual money for it is a national enterprise that the Quakers are raising.
It's fascinating. Let's bring Philip in. You run Zest, which is involved in healthcare, which is of course a public good, and look after elderly people in homes and people in need of care, and quite often that is funded by the public funds as well. What's your takeaway? Do you think there's any translation of what you just heard to today's modern way of establishing businesses? And
I suppose entrepreneurs is the takeaway, where they're looking for solutions to problems. So if you think about that one, and trying to move people, move cargo, move goods, guys get together, use their own capital, and decide, here's a solution.
Now you did a bit of this when quite a few years ago, certainly not contemporary times, like 10 years ago, you established a business that put into care homes and caring facilities, nursery schools and so on, cameras, which was at the time quite an innovative use. We all see cameras everywhere now. And you were allowing these care homes to monitor, to prevent abuse and to maintain safety of their residents or their children in nursery schools.
Yes.
That was an innovation. Tell us about how that's come about and how technology has changed in the last 15 years on that.
Literally that came about. At one point I ran a company that had 25,000 beds for older people, and I spent a lot of my time addressing concerns that families raised about care. And one of the biggest concerns was often the scourge of unexplained injury. So a family went into a care home, mum had a bruise, and the usual line trotted out on those circumstances was, "We don't know what happened to her, sorry." Well, for me personally, that's pretty unacceptable. And so really the Care Protect was born out of that particular experience.
And just explain how it works, because it isn't just about technology, it's
It's
people as well. You pull together different things.
It is. It's a controversial solution in some ways. It requires at the front end a camera based in a communal area or based in a private room. That camera is activated after a number of consents have been given. At the other end of that process, we have a team of social workers, nurses, people who are on a professional register, who have experience of care and the elderly environment, and they are randomly auditing facilities with cameras in place. And so camera footage is recorded, but on many occasions it isn't looked at unless there's an incident. But for those providers who also want an audit function, then these guys randomly look in at care. They look at a feeding experience, a bathing experience. They look at the interaction between staff and older people. Are they treating them with respect? How are they speaking to them? That kind of review.
So it's like an unannounced video-based inspection.
Yeah, the world is virtual today. We all are able to work from home, and we buy everything online. The idea that people cannot be protected unless there's footfall is just not true.
And you did this before COVID and before the virtual world in business became absolutely conventional. It was...
2015 was the very first time we started to test it. We had our own homes. We still have some of our own care homes. All of those homes have these systems in place. And we now service a number of other corporate clients, and those clients have seen the value over that same period.
Fantastic. Now, I want to talk about something which is of the wider good. I don't know how you got involved in this, so tell us what dragged you into this charity, ReusingIT. I'll flash up a photo on our screen for our viewers rather than listeners, which shows in one of your own properties lots of old computers stacked up on pallets, ready to be distributed to the great and good of the world. Tell me how you get these computers, what you do with them.
We have some fantastic donors. So people like Aegon, lots of other big insurance companies, other corporates, lots of the health boards, for example. We I suppose pester them for their old hardware. And the idea is very simple. After 2 or 3 or 4 years, often a laptop is being replaced by something more modern. We take that older laptop, we replace the memory, the hard drive, we can reconfigure them, we get them all singing, all dancing again, and then we take those to Ukraine. And at the moment, children in Ukraine are not at school. Very many of them are operating in bomb shelters. They're sleeping there, they're eating there, and they're having an online education there. And they're having it because we take them laptops. We're committed to delivering 5,000 this year. Wow. Working with an agent, a partner agency in Ukraine, and we will be there probably 3-4 times. I've just returned from a trip 4 weeks ago. We were some 40 miles from the front line. Those families and kids are living in real difficult circumstances. But the laptop not only provides an education, but it's enabling them to keep in touch with family members in other parts of Ukraine, and Ukrainians indeed who have actually migrated to other parts of Europe. So it's a fantastic solution. And I think from a recycling standpoint, any corporate business who is looking for an ESG solution, something like ReusingIT is perfect. We will provide you with the policies. We will come and collect the hardware. We will provide you certification for data wiping. And you then will know, and you will get a video of your actual computers in the hands of a child somewhere in Sumy, somewhere in Kryvyi Rih, somewhere in Kyiv. After 3-4 months, we will then send a video to those organizations, letting them see how we're reusing those.
It's a brilliant thing. I just take you very quickly down a side issue. Tell me about the trip to Ukraine. What was the environment like at this time? Because it was a recent trip, you said.
Yeah, the last trip was, it's a very emotional experience, to be honest. We visit orphanages when we are there. Some kids have literally been dislocated from one side of the country to the other. And those children have gone from, in 1 week, losing family to finding themselves in an environment with complete strangers. And you're more and more that is happening. When you're closer to the front, every single night, we work with an app. Every single night, you're literally heading out of your accommodation to a bomb shelter. And if you ever do have an opportunity, we have made a documentary. It's on YouTube. It's called Silent Night. And it will give you a 45-minute experience of what it's actually like.
Wow.
So 6 months ago, 2 years ago, we delivered to a hospital in Kyiv. Today that hospital's gone because it was missiled. So it's a very austere environment, but children are responding well to what we're doing with.
Well, you're doing your bit, and you're to be admired for that. I mean, when the schools and laptops, I mean, your newspaper during COVID, it was in getting kids laptops. I remember and I was involved in giving laptops to some kids, not many, but we bought a few. It is very important that digital learning is possible.
Yes, and it is quite shocking, really, that there is a strata of society that really doesn't have access to these things. And there are stats about kind of child poverty in bits of Middlesbrough where people are 51% of children are in growing up in poverty. So we can debate kind of the definition of poverty and what it means, but for those individuals, they really are outside the stuff that most people have.
And yet there are people probably watching this program who have relatively modern laptops in their attic because it's got the latest.
Well, that's right. I've got a pile of printers, for example, and
I mean, the sad thing, and you've just raised it. I mean, digital poverty in the UK is alive, very much alive. And we are working...
What do you mean by digital poverty?
Well, digital poverty, I mean, there are kids who have no access, no digital skills. Not just kids, older people in remote parts of the Highlands, for example, who can't get online for a doctor's appointment, who can't buy anything online because they don't have either the equipment or the skills. There are kids, we delivered some laptops to a school some months ago in a part of the UK, and they were at that school, they were sharing one laptop between 5 kids. And so when I stayed to observe what was going on, it was obvious the child who had all the experience at home. And that's the one that was really, using the laptop. The other 3 or 4 kids, you could see various bits of experience. But the sad thing was there was always a child in each one of those groups who hadn't a clue what was going on because they had no experience. We're letting those children finish their education without any digital skills. And then those kids are technically then excluded themselves from some opportunities.
I mean, the economy generally, and it is a business program, so we'll come back to that. This actually does link, though. I have a relative who is unemployed at the moment. She's in her 50s, and she's on out-of-work benefits with very few savings. We all help, but nevertheless, she has very little money. And her benefits add up to around £500 a month, maybe a little less. But the broadband bill is 10% of it. Now, she's decided to cut the broadband bill, so she has no broadband. Now, whether that's sensible, that's up to individuals to make their own mind up when they're looking after their own money, but it's a rational thing to cut back. And it is, I've just looked at the KPMG forecast for the economy saying unemployment could reach a 5-year high of nearly 5% next year. And it's ticking upwards, isn't it? And, the 3 of us around this table can actually remember the 1980s and the 1970s. It's not a pleasant thing. There are lots of implications of what's happening on the economy. Philip?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I speaking as someone who is an employer, I absolutely know across the range of businesses that I have that we have stopped recruitment because recruitment at the moment, any role that we would have recruited that we considered non-essential, we have now completely and utterly stopped because the increases in things like business rates, the national minimum wage, whilst that wasn't an issue for our staff, the differential always has to be maintained. And so the reality is we're just seeing margin squeeze across those businesses. We're reluctant to make more investment because we're still in this environment where we're not sure what tax policy is going to be. We're in another round of it in October. And again, people are holding back. That's certainly my experience before they make a commitment to an investment.
Yeah, the budget is, I mean, you do politics as well, Chris, so I'll bring you in on that. The budget is causing, in my experience, this is more testimony than opinion, it is causing people to hold back on their decisions, and that is causing a stagnation in activity.
Yeah. Unlike, say, the credit crunch 2008, where we kind of hit a wall, and COVID as well, hit a wall, shut down. Something very quiet seems to be happening, where we have things like the minimum wage, the increase in national insurance contributions, and all these things are just kind of gradually accumulating, it seems to me. And I know, for example, the hospitality sector is really being hit hard by the NIC's increase, but they're kind of going through the summer, and they're going to make it through the summer, but then because they don't know quite where things are going in November's budget, then they're doing exactly what we're saying about kind of just retrenching, drawing in. So it's not going to be like the credit crunch where we all felt that impact.
I'll give you a little bit of testimony of something that actually has happened in my own recent experience, which is a business that we have been doing some work for. Our PR firm was going to build a number of properties, very important properties that were going to service universities and other public institutions. And those properties were going to be funded by pension fund contributions or private investment in tranches of £250,000. So you could have a slice of this investment. Now that investment has dried up for two reasons. First of all, people who are my age are worrying about whether they will have a tax-free pension withdrawal, because you can withdraw 25% tax-free at the moment. And so many people my age, maybe me, I haven't made my mind up.
You're not old enough to retire, Greg.
No. But you are withdrawing it prematurely in case it's taxed.
Oh, right.
And, you know, it can be a lot of money you withdraw, sir. And then you withdraw the money, maybe it's a couple of £100,000 for someone my age because you built your pension up. What do you then do with the money? Well, do you give it to the person building the property, or give it to Philip to put into his care homes? Or do you put it into government bonds, gilts, which are tax-free, capital gains tax growth free, and are higher interest rate because the government's got itself into borrowing problems. And these gilts are magnets for investment. They're sort of draining the investment community's money. Have I got that? That's my own experience.
No, I mean, my own view of gilts, I mean, I wouldn't see them as an instrument that I would invest in currently, because at some point in time, you know, any country can go bust.
Absolutely. You think the government could go bust?
Well, you know, I think we're a very rich economy, comparatively speaking, but I think if we keep on the trajectory that we're on, you know, I think there's a real concern at some point that borrowing will just get out of control.
Yeah.
And I mean, that may be why the Chancellor's mulling over certain options in October, November time. But the reality is we're seeing capital flight. We're seeing low investor confidence. There's so many other issues that if those decisions are wrong, it's going to be incredibly painful.
He speaks in a hard-headed business way, and I give you some testimony. Do you think, because you talk to this lot of politicians quite regularly, you know them well, you're very, do you think that they understand this?
Yes, I think they do, but they also have other imperatives that are sitting on their shoulders, shouting about how you can't get a dentist, and there are potholes absolutely everywhere, and there are no laptops in schools, and they have those things really shouting at them that they also have to address.
And the media gets drawn into things. The immigration debate is a compelling narrative, flags everywhere, lots of people shouting, and it's got good guys, it's got bad guys. But this is more complex stuff, but it's underpinning it all, isn't it?
Yes, and the immigration debate is absolutely fascinating, because there is no easy fix. And we keep saying we've got to stop the boats, or whatever other three-word buzzword whatever three-word buzz phrase there is. And these are far more complicated than just stopping boats and turning things back.
Yeah.
Oh, to live in simpler times. 200 years ago, the Stockton, I live in Darlington, Darlington. I always put Darlington first. I don't know if you do.
No. It's a PR exercise because it was a Darlington project and they knew Stockton would have to come in. So they thought, how can we persuade Stockton that it's a really good idea and they need to get on board? Well, we'll put their name first.
Naming rights.
Yeah, that's right. The sort of guidance you would give.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, naming rights. That's good. I'm glad to know. I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know it was formal, but there we are. Anyway, the Stockton-Darlington Railway is 200, and some really good business stories from that. Yeah. Philip, best of luck with Care Protect, but even more importantly, if you want to donate to ReusingIT.
ReusingIT.org is our website. We would be delighted to have equipment, and any donation, cash donation you want to make, there's an opportunity there. But if there are corporate institutions out there with a cupboard full of laptops, please let us have them.
I'll have a look in the attic. Thank you, Chris Lloyd. Thank you, Philip Scott. If you want to join us as a guest on the Northern Business Podcast, feel free to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks to our podcast producer Alex Dryden and our technical operator Robin Campbell. See you next time.